Hey, if you're a Led Zeppelin fan, I think you're going to enjoy what I have for you here today. Now, today is February 12th, 2025. Now, normally on this channel, I don't say what day it is because it just doesn't matter if it's Tuesday or Sunday or May or July, because the things we talk about on this channel happened 50 years ago. These are old record reviews and concert reviews and interviews and things from newspapers and magazines. So the date today doesn't really matter. Well, the reason I mention it today, and the reason I'm doing a Led Zeppelin article, especially one about Led Zeppelin II, which I'm going to show you here in just a second, is because a couple hours from now, I'm heading down to Las Vegas to see Becoming Led Zeppelin. And I know a lot of people who follow this channel are a little bit like me, where we kind of, we became teenagers in the 80s and we started exploring music. A lot of us had been fans of Kiss when we were kids. And then all of a sudden we get into the 80s and we start getting into, preteen and teens, and you start exploring all this amazing music out there. And one of these bands that just was kind of always there was Led Zeppelin. And I remember the first actual album where I had the physical copy of it, the LP, the record, was Led Zeppelin IV. And I still have the copy that I got. And I absolutely loved that record. But I think it was, and I tell you what, for a lot of us, these memories get a little blurry. We just kind of remember the feelings and the emotions of all of it. But as I recall, somebody had given me a cassette tape or a recording, something of Led Zeppelin II. And I remember hearing that opening guitar riff on Whole Lotta Love. And that otherworldly guitar tone, what was I listening to? And it was just so interesting. And I don't know what it is about it, but it just grabbed me. And then, of course, Robert Plant comes in there, and what I had heard, I remember I had heard Stairway to Heaven at some point. So when I heard that Whole Lotta Love, it didn't sound like the voice that I had heard in Stairway to Heaven. It was this other kind of way more intense and guttural, and I just sat there just blown away. I as I recall, I had headphones on, and I just was going, "Oh my, what am I listening to?" And you remember this, you may remember when you first heard this, and that sound, and the Whole Lotta Love, and just like, what is this? And then they go through a couple of these verses, and then all of a sudden you hear that ch-ch-ch on the hi-hat, and it goes into this chaos. Now, I'll be honest with you, the first time I heard that chaos in the middle of it, I didn't like it. Today, I actually love that part of the song, but at the time I was like, what is this? But then I will never forget when you get to the end of the noises and everything that's happening, and you get to the end of it, and then all of a sudden Bonham comes in, and then and that guitar solo, oh my gosh. I think I talked about this on another video that we did just recently, but that guitar solo hit me harder than probably any guitar solo before or after. It was one of those things where just chills, and the hair stands up in your arm. It was that guitar solo. And if you have heard it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's just nothing like it anywhere. And to be whatever I was at the time, 13, 14-year-old kid, and to hear that guitar solo, there was just nothing like it. It was so powerful. And then, of course, the song kicks back in, and then it goes into that part where it slows down. You hear Robert Plant way down inside, and then you're hearing the other things, the quiet voices on the other tracks that are left over from another part of the recording, and then woman, you need me, ba ba, and then the la, that, oh my gosh. And then it kicks back in, and you hear him doing all the vamps at the end, and it was just an overwhelming experience. Right there, that first song on Led Zeppelin II. So, of course, I ended up having to buy Led Zeppelin II, and this is the copy that I bought back in the 80s. The whole thing, start to finish, the album just blew my mind. It was incredible. So again, you've all seen the cover before, and then of course you open it up. If you've never owned the vinyl, this is what we had on the inside of the vinyl. You got the four guys here, the big blimp right there. And then the back, which is kind of not much to it, and you kind of have to open it up to get the whole effect. And then, of course, the guys in the band right there. But so you start listening to this album, and we finish with Whole Lotta Love, and then it goes into What Is and What Should Never Be, and it kind of quiets down. And then it gets to the end of that song, and they're doing that hard panning, dun-na, 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 and it's just jumping back and forth between your ears. And then Robert Plant, and again, this song where you go, how in the world is there so much awesome stuff? Then you've got, you start moving on, and you've got the Lemon song, and Thank You is just awesome. And then, of course, Heartbreaker and Live and Love and Made, which is like this two songs that even though it's two separate songs, they're kind of connected to each other. And every single time the ones played on the radio, both of them are always played every single time. And then Ramble On. And that one, here I am having my mind blown listening to this album just to begin with, and then Ramble On comes on, and that really kind of soft guitar and that little rhythm that's going on, and leaves are falling all around, time I was on my way, and you're just getting pulled into this, and then all of a sudden, again, a similar feeling of just the hair standing on end when he starts screaming, "Ramble on! Now's the time is now." It just, again, I'm sure understand exactly what I'm talking about. And then we move into, of course, we had Moby Dick, which is this basically a drum solo, which just being honest, whenever I talk about these things, I didn't love that as a 13, 14-year-old kid listening to the drum solo. But then we get past that and we move on to Bring It On Home. And it starts out with that just awesome blues where he's got that effect on his voice. And then and again, I'm like, what in the world is this? And it just launches. And it's just this powerful, rhythmic, bluesy thing that just was so great. So I get to the end of the album, and I had never really had an experience where because again, I'm a young kid, where something like this had just knocked me over so thoroughly from start to finish. And we do a lot of Led Zeppelin videos on this channel, and I spend a lot of time talking to people about Led Zeppelin. And it's so interesting because I ask myself this question: what is it? Like, I could not explain to you what it is. I'm just telling you my feelings and how I reacted to it. But what is it? What was it about it? What that made this so that not just me, but it's like universal. People watching this video right now experienced what I experienced, and they know what I'm talking about. And could I intellectually explain it? What it was about these guys and this music and this band and the sound and the lyrics and the singing and that when it all came together, it was just this really, really special thing. And of course, this was the album the first full Led Zeppelin album that just kind of got me. And then, of course, over time, I bought everything, and I've gone back and forth discussing which one's your favorite. Is it's kind of pointless, but it still is kind of fun talking about those things. What's the one that you love the most? But they were such a spectacular, unique thing that had the right people at the right time and the right whatever. It just was the right thing. And obviously, because they put out this documentary, and I see it popping up, probably because I follow this stuff anyway, but it's on all my social feeds, and everybody, people I know are talking about it, and then of course I'm looking at that like, well, I obviously I need to go see this. So today, because of the movie and because of the period that it covers, I thought I want to find a really interesting record review of Led Zeppelin II, and I found it. This one's really interesting. And if you're a Led Zeppelin fan, which if you've made it all the way to this point in the video, you probably are. So I think you're going to really like this. And it's not very long, but it's it's so, when you hear this, if you can relate to what I was talking about a minute ago of this, with this record, if you can relate to it, this article that I'm going to read you will sound so foreign as to be almost comical. So like I said, I think you're going to enjoy this. This was printed in the Tulsa World, the version I'm looking at right here, on January 4th of 1970. So to put this in perspective, this album, Led Zeppelin II, was released on October 22nd of 1969. And these are always fun to put in perspective because I was, 5 months old at that point? I'm obviously not buying Led Zeppelin records at that point, but this was happening and I was just, I wasn't even walking yet. But that's when this was printed. So if you're looking at you can see the screen right now, if you're watching this instead of just listening to it, you'll see that the title of this article is Led Zeppelin Zooms to Sudden Halt. And you'll also see this was apparently originally printed in the Los Angeles Times. And again, this is basically a record review of Led Zeppelin II. And you'll see down here, they have a picture of the band. And then, okay, so give this a listen. Until 1964, there were almost no hit records by English artists in this country. But the English invasion, led by the Beatles in 1964, was sudden and has proved surprisingly permanent. Not only have such early English stars as the Beatles and the Rolling Stones maintained their popularity, but a steady stream of new ones, from Tom Jones to Cream to Joe Cocker, has joined them. Nearly 1/4 of the 100 best-selling albums in the United States are by British artists. In fact, 3 of the nation's 4 top sellers are by English record figures: the Beatles, Abbey Road, the new Led Zeppelin album, Led Zeppelin II, and Tom Jones, Live in Las Vegas. But the English, like anyone else, have their ups and downs. One of the downs is Led Zeppelin II. Though it has already passed the 1 million sales mark, the album is shockingly void of creativity. Now, if you're familiar with this album, I just want you to soak that in for a second, that somebody just said that. To me, and again, I'm seeing this, I was hearing this as a teenager, but I mean, even today, knowing all the stuff, because I listened to a lot of stuff from this period, the idea that they would say that it was shockingly void of creativity, I don't know what they mean. Especially because of the fact that there was so much variety and interesting stuff happening on this record, which anyway, just fascinates me listening to this. So, led by guitarist Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin includes Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham. The group has built an enormous following in the short time it has been recording. The first album, titled simply Led Zeppelin, has been a bestseller for some 40 weeks. Another rock blues entry, Led Zeppelin, has some obvious attractions. In the new album, Page's dominant guitar work, he's one of the most respected guitarists in rock, and the powerhouse rock beat on some of the selections. But the one overriding fault with the album is the unimaginativeness of its predictable instrumentation, colorless songs, and blatant gimmicks. Now, whenever I read these things, part of the intrigue and what makes these interesting is the context. Because we have the context of 50 years later. We know all the intervening steps. We know the impact this album had. We know all the other albums after this. And so sometimes when I listen to these things, you have to peer through this and realize that this guy writing this, all he has to go on is Led Zeppelin 1, and he somehow got himself a copy of this, and he's writing a review on it. Knows 3's not out. Of course, 4 doesn't exist. None of the rest of it exists. And so he's he's basically saying there's this new band that's kind of this hotshot group, and this is their second record, and it's not very good. And that's what we're hearing here. He doesn't realize the legend status that awaits these guys. Okay, let's see. Unimaginable. Okay, Whole Lotta Love, which has become a hit single, is a classic case of musical excess. It is so overdone that the background sounds like a World War II air raid. Now, and again, for me, that song had so many pieces that basically just kind of like wake you up from the inside. So many unique, amazing, incredible things that happen in that one song. And that's just one song on this album. That it's just interesting to hear somebody make that comment. Sure, Led Zeppelin is heavy, but if your musical standards require even the slightest hint of originality, this album doesn't make it. Now, a lot of people were critical of some of this stuff simply because of the really the obvious borrowing of the blues. I mean, Led Zeppelin, or not Led Zeppelin, Whole Lotta Love, a lot of people accuse them of taking and ripping off a whole bunch of old blues rhythms and blues riffs to make this stuff happen, including lyrics, like Willie Dixon, right? And yet, what they built out of it, they took whatever those pieces were and they created something so unimaginably fantastic. And I have to, I question myself sometimes, to be honest, because you can't help at this point but have nostalgia tied up into it, because this album to me is a 14-year-old kid with headphones, and I still have those same feelings come back when I listen to it, and so it's impossible for me to erase that. But if I go back to it, and I think is evidenced by the fact that there's so many people that seem to have the same kind of experience, whatever their age, there was something more to this than what a lot of people say. Now, I'm sure, because we always get some pushback on this channel, there'll be some people that don't like this album. I'm sure that's true. But for me, it's so interesting to listen to somebody say something that to me seems so utterly foreign to reality. Like, are we listening? Did he have the right album? Was he listening to the right thing? Anyway, that's the way some of this stuff comes across. The only thing that it has in common with the Beatles, Abbey Road, is location on the sales chart. Abbey Road has style, creativity, and pace. Led Zeppelin II has none of the three. Now, I'm going to agree with him that Abbey Road has style, creativity, and pace. And it might be one of their... I mean, I'm a big Beatles fan anyway. I think that was a masterpiece of an album. Abbey Road was, no question about it, start to finish. It was a masterpiece for sure. But to say that Led Zeppelin II has none of those three, the style, creativity, and even pace. The way this album launches with Whole Lotta Love, and that song alone takes you on this incredible voyage, through the middle part with all the hard panning and the sound effects, to that solo breakdown with the hits, the slowing down and Robert Plant screaming. I mean, it had just all these movements in this one song. And then to move from there to what is, to slow it down the way they did, and then to move into some blues, and to have, I thought the pacing on this album was like perfect. Like I said, I would listen to the thing start to finish, and I was having these incredible experiences just listening to this thing. So it's again, it's interesting to listen to this. I mean, this guy, whoever he was, wrote this, 55 years ago now. 55 years ago, this guy wrote this, and he was clearly not impressed with what had just happened with Led Zeppelin II. And who knows who this was, and if he's even still around. But it is interesting now with all of the time that has passed. And here this afternoon, I'm going to be going to see, I mean, think about that. 50 some odd years later, and they're putting out a documentary about this band that, I mean, like my kids. How many bands from the 1970s? Well, because they're my kids, they know a lot of them. But how many bands from the 1970s do most teenage kids know about? And I told this story on this channel a few months ago, but just to kind of put a fine point on this, I think it was about 3 months ago, I was going to the gym, and those of you that kind of know a little bit about what I do, I go to the gym, I get up to like around 3:45 every morning and I head to the gym. So there's not a lot of people on the road, there's not a lot of people there. And so I pull up to the gym, I park and I'm getting out of my car, and as I'm getting out of my car, another car with its window down, mind you, this is like November, it's a little bit chilly outside, St. George is pretty warm, but it's a little bit chilly, so he's got his window down, and blaring out of his window, again at like 3:45 in the morning, pulling into this parking lot, is Kashmir. And so I'm walking away from my car and I'm walking up to the front door, and I have to stop myself because I just have to know who is this that's pulling into this parking lot at 3:45 in the morning, right around the same time I'm getting here. He's got his window down and he's blaring Kashmir. I just got to know. So this person gets out of the car and he gets, put in his coat and kind of closes the door, and he turns around and he starts walking toward the front door, and this guy can't be 21. He's a young kid. Well, to me, a kid. And he's listening to Led Zeppelin at 3:45 in the morning, window down, blaring it loud as heck, pulling into the parking lot, heading to the gym. And the kid was probably born in the 90s, if not the year 2000 or later. And this band is still resonating. And so you ask yourself, what other bands have done that, that have that? And so it's such a remarkable thing for us now to look at this and to think back at what this was like for people to experience this the first time, and also realizing how many people like me and like you since then, years and years and years after this was put together, having that same first-time experience that people had when it was first released. And probably there will be generations after us. And there was something really, and you can't I could never put my finger on it, but there's something special about this group of guys, the right time, the right place, the right talent and instruments and equipment and technology, and it all came together, and Led Zeppelin. Anyway, I'd love to get your thoughts, your insight, your input on something like this. Did you have similar experiences that I did? And have you seen this documentary yet? Like I said, I'll probably do a bunch of shows, I'm imagining, over the next little while. We already do probably too many Led Zeppelin shows, but probably have several more simply because it's been on my mind so much, and especially with the documentary and seeing that, we'll probably have some more interesting things to talk about. But anyway, hey, thanks for taking the time to watch this channel. And for those of you that, we get a lot of people contacting us. They go to Audiomover, and we've got some forms there to mail to communicate with the studio. And if you're interested in how you can help us, if you like any of these videos, just copy the address out of the address bar, the URL, and go put it in Facebook and other social media places, or email it to people, because the way to help these channels like this grow, and I hope you enjoy this stuff, and we try to create neat and interesting things that people, similar interests will really like this. one of the best ways to help this thing out is to just send out, to let other people know about it, word of mouth, and let people know that this is here and what we're doing. And because there's so many people out there that I think would really relate to this and enjoy it. And we just really appreciate your willingness to just share it with other people, if you would. And anyway, and if you're not already, please follow the channel and like the video. And as always, all your feedback, stories, experiences, we love hearing those things. And we've got some really interesting plans for this coming year where we're going to utilize some of those things, and a lot of cool stuff coming. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate the time you take to watch these videos and all the feedback we get. We actually pay attention to it and listen to it. We really thank you for all the feedback and insight on these things. And so anyway, with that, have yourself a fantastic day.